Under the twin suns of Clyra 9, the marketplace was loud with laughter and noise. The smell of iron dust and oil filled the air. Aliens shouted prices, traded, and joked. But in one dark corner sat a small alien girl, wrapped in torn cloth, her head lowered, her sleeves empty. Her name was Lyra. She was born without hands. The other aliens called her No Hands Freak. Every time she passed, they laughed or threw things at her. She never fought back. She only watched, her big silver eyes following every movement of the machines the humans built in the far end of the colony. Humans were rare here. Most aliens thought they were weak, but they were clever with metal. They built strange things that walked, floated, and talked. Lyra loved to watch them from behind broken crates. Sometimes she would stay there for hours, forgetting her hunger, forgetting her pain. One afternoon, as the sun started to sink, a group of young aliens walked past her. They pointed and laughed. "Look, the no-hands freak is watching again," one said. "Maybe she wants to borrow someone's hands," another sneered. The group laughed loudly, their tails hitting the dusty ground. Lyra looked down, her heart heavy. She wanted to scream, but her throat was dry. Then a calm voice spoke from behind the group. "That's not funny," it said. The laughter stopped. A tall human stepped forward, his face covered in soot, his clothes full of grease stains. He carried a toolbox and looked tired but kind. His name was Mason. He worked as a mechanic for the alien trade ships. The aliens looked at him and hissed, "Stay out of this, human." Mason didn't move. His blue eyes locked on Lyra. "What's your name?" he asked softly. Lyra looked away, afraid to speak. "She doesn't talk," one of the aliens said. "She's useless," but Mason just smiled slightly. "Nobody's useless," he said. And then he walked away toward his workshop. That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the human's words. Nobody's useless. No one had ever said that to her before. The next day, she went back to the same place. Hiding behind the same crates, Mason was there again. Working on a broken hover engine, sparks flew around him, and the sound of tools echoed like music. After a long moment, Mason looked up. He saw her watching. "You again," he said with a small grin. "Come closer, I don't bite." Lyra hesitated, then took a step, then another. She stopped near the light, her face shy. Mason pointed at the engine. "You like machines?" he asked. Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes bright. He studied her sleeves, the empty cloth where her hands should be, and spoke quietly. "I can build things, but never something that matters." Then he looked at her again. "Maybe that can change." Lyra didn't understand. "Change?" she whispered. Mason leaned closer and said, "If you trust me, I can build you hands." The world froze for her. No one had ever said those words. She thought it was a cruel joke. "You build me hands?" she asked in disbelief. Mason nodded seriously. "They won't be perfect, but they'll be yours." Lyra shook her head quickly. "No one can do that. No one can fix me." Her voice trembled. Mason's tone stayed calm. "Maybe no one tried." From a nearby stall, a group of aliens overheard them and began to laugh. "Ha! The human's crazy!" one shouted. "He thinks he can make hands for the freak." The crowd roared with laughter, but Mason didn't care. He just looked at Lyra. "Let them laugh," he said quietly. They laughed at humans once too. For the first time, Lyra smiled just a little. Her heart beat faster. She wanted to believe, but fear pulled her back. "If they find out, they'll hurt you," she whispered. Mason shrugged. "Then we'll be careful," he said. "Meet me after dark behind the workshop." And he walked away, leaving her standing under the fading suns. That night, Lyra waited until the market lights dimmed. She walked slowly through the shadows, her empty sleeves brushing her sides. She reached the workshop door. It was open. The warm glow of light spilled onto the sand inside. Mason was sitting beside a pile of metal parts, his eyes bright with ideas. "You came," he said. Lyra nodded. Mason showed her a rough sketch on a metal board. "These will be your hands," he said. The drawing showed thin arms with gears and wires. "They'll move with your nerves, feel heat and cold, maybe even pain." Lyra stared at it, unable to speak. Tears filled her eyes. She looked at him and whispered, "Why would you do this for me?" Mason smiled, wiping oil from his fingers. "Because someone once did the same for me," he said. Lyra frowned. "You?" Mason nodded, his eyes distant. "When I was broken," he said softly, "someone helped me stand again." Lyra looked at the glowing sketch once more, the lines shining like hope. The sound of laughter from outside echoed faintly, But she didn't care anymore. She sat beside Mason, her voice small but steady. Then, "Let's build them," she said, outside. The night wind howled across Clara 9, carrying the laughter of those who still mocked her. They had no idea what the human and the girl were about to create. No idea that the next sunrise would mark the birth of something no one had ever seen. A pair of hands that could change everything. The next night, the moons of Clara 9 hung low and pale. The air smelled of iron and burnt oil. Mason's workshop flickered with weak yellow light. The walls were lined with broken tools and half-finished machines. But in the center, on a rusty table, lay something new. A pair of metal arms, thin and rough, still waiting for life. Lyra stood quietly by the door, her shadow trembling on the wall. She had never entered a human's place before. It felt strange, full of strange smells and humming energy. Mason looked up from his tools and smiled. "You're early," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Good. We have a lot to do." He showed her his sketches again. The blue light from his pad flickered across his tired face. "These are the nerves," he said, pointing to glowing lines. "They'll connect here, to your shoulder, through microsensors." Lyra stared in wonder. She couldn't read human symbols, but she could feel the meaning behind his words. "You really think they'll move?" she whispered. Mason grinned faintly. "Not at first," he said. "They'll tremble, then twitch, then move like your own hands." His tone was quiet but filled with faith. Lyra blinked, unsure if he was a genius or just mad. But either way, she couldn't stop watching him. He handed her a small piece of metal. "Hold this." He stopped, realizing she couldn't. An awkward silence followed. Mason scratched his head, then chuckled. "Right. My mistake," he said softly. "Old habits." But instead of pity, his voice carried respect. He turned and began adjusting a small hovering arm. A helper drone that could hold tools. "Let this one be your hands for now," he said. Programming it quickly, the little machine floated toward her, its light blinking like a tiny heart. Lyra smiled as it hovered close, mimicking her head tilt. "It likes you," Mason said. "Machines always know kindness." For hours, Mason worked, shaping metal, fusing wires, melting plates with the heat torch. Lyra watched every move, memorizing the way his fingers worked. Fast, confident, alive, she felt envy, but also something else. Something bright she hadn't felt before. Hope. But not everyone was sleeping that night. Across the street, in the dark alley behind the junk market, 3 young aliens whispered angrily. "The human is wasting time on that freak," one hissed. "He should build for us, not for her." Another slammed his tail on the sand. "Let's teach him a lesson." They crept toward the workshop with silent feet, carrying metal rods and a plan to break everything, their laughter low and cruel. Inside, Lyra suddenly felt uneasy. Her sensitive ears caught faint sounds outside. "Someone's there," she whispered. Mason froze. He heard it too. "Stay quiet," he said. Turning off the lights, the workshop went dark. Only the faint glow from the drone remained. Footsteps echoed, slow, closer. Mason grabbed a wrench and motioned for her to hide. She ducked behind a pile of scrap metal. Her heart racing, the door creaked open, a cold breeze entered. Then the sound of boots, one alien whispered. "Break his toys," and another laughed. "And maybe his legs?" They spread out, smashing tables and kicking boxes. Mason stepped out of the shadows. "Stop!" he shouted. The nearest alien turned and swung his rod. It hit Mason's shoulder hard. He groaned but didn't fall. "Leave my work alone," he said, grabbing the alien's arm. The others jumped in, hitting him again. Tools clattered, sparks flew. Lyra trembled, watching helplessly from her hiding spot. Her chest hurt as she saw blood on Mason's cheek, bright red under the moonlight. He was bleeding because of her. She wanted to scream, to run, but something inside her snapped. She crawled toward the table, her empty sleeves brushing the ground. Her eyes locked on the half-finished metal arms. The drone beeped, sensing her movement. Its lights glowed brighter. Mason fell to his knees. One alien raised his rod again, and at that moment, Lyra's body moved on its own. She slammed her shoulder against the table. One of the metal arms rolled off and touched her bare skin. A jolt of light ran through her body, a shock so deep it made her scream. The arm twitched, then twitched again. Metal fingers jerked as if alive. Mason looked up, stunned. The bullies froze. The air filled with strange, humming energy. The metal arm's joints glowed faint blue, then pulsed to the rhythm of her heartbeat. Mason's eyes widened. "Lyra! Don't move!" he shouted. But it was too late. The energy from the prototype connected with her nerve lines like lightning. She gasped as her nerves burned. Yet she didn't feel pain. She felt connection. The aliens backed away, terrified. "What is this?" one cried. Mason stumbled forward, grabbing a wire. Trying to shut down the system, sparks exploded, filling the room with smoke. When the light faded, the bullies were gone. Running into the night, Lyra lay on the floor, shaking. The metal arm still attached to her shoulder. Twitching weakly, she looked up at Mason, her voice trembling. "It moved." Mason knelt beside her, eyes wide. "Yeah," he whispered. "It moved with you." He lifted her gently. Setting her on a chair, the arm hung limp but glowing faintly. "We'll fix it," he said, voice hoarse. "We'll make both work." Lyra smiled weakly. "They called me freak," she said softly, "but tonight, I felt like more than that outside." The moon shone on the quiet streets, the bullies were gone, but whispers would soon spread, that the no-hands freak now had a moving arm, that a human had dared to defy the laws of nature, and that somewhere in a dusty workshop, the first living machine on Clyra 9 had taken its first breath. The sun rose weakly over Clyra 9, painting the sky orange and violet. Mason's workshop was silent except for the faint hum of machinery. Metal parts lay scattered everywhere, and on a small table, a single metal arm gleamed under the light, wires still wrapped around Lyra's shoulder. Twitching softly with each heartbeat, Lyra sat still as Mason worked, his hands careful, his face serious. "It's not just connecting," he said quietly. "It's bonding. Your body is accepting the metal like it's part of you." Lyra looked down, her voice small. "It doesn't hurt," she whispered. "It feels alive." Mason nodded slowly. "That's what scares me," he said, his eyes full of both awe and worry. He checked the readings on his tablet, lines of light dancing across the screen. "Your nerve system is stronger than I thought," he murmured. "It's fusing faster than expected." Lyra smiled nervously. "So, I can move?" she asked. Mason hesitated. "A little," he said. "But we need to test it slowly." He placed a tiny metal sphere in front of her. "Try to lift it." Lyra stared at it. The mechanical fingers twitched, then trembled. A soft click echoed in the room as the metal fingers slowly closed. The sphere rolled an inch, then lifted from the table. Lyra gasped, her eyes wide with shock. I did it," she whispered. Mason smiled faintly. "Yes," he said softly. "You did," but before they could celebrate, the workshop door burst open with a loud crash. Metal fragments flew across the floor. Lyra jumped. Mason turned, his face tightening. 3 armored alien enforcers stepped inside, their armor black and glowing with red lines. Their insignia marked them as Security Division 9. The lead enforcer pointed his weapon. "Human engineer Mason Holt," he said coldly. "You are under investigation for illegal biomechanical experimentation." Mason stood slowly, his voice calm but firm. "She's not a weapon," he said. "She's a person," the alien sneered. "You are mixing living tissue with prohibited tech. That makes her a weapon." Lyra froze, fear rising inside her chest. "Please," she whispered. "He didn't hurt me." The enforcer ignored her. "Step away from the subject," he ordered. Mason moved protectively in front of her. "She has a name," he said sharply. "Her name is Lyra." The aliens raised their rifles, glowing red. "Step aside, human." Lyra's heart pounded. She could feel the mechanical arm reacting, glowing, humming, responding to her fear. The metal fingers clenched without her control. "Mason, it's moving," she whispered. Mason looked back at her. "Stay calm," he said. "Don't fight it," but it was too late. A surge of energy burst through her nerves. The arm moved on its own, grabbing the nearest tool and throwing it across the room with a metallic shriek. The enforcers ducked. The tool smashed into the wall. Sparks exploded. One alien fired back. The shot hit the table. Flames spread instantly. Mason pulled Lyra behind a steel beam. "Run!" he shouted. "I can't leave you," she cried. Mason pushed her toward the back exit. "I'll follow," he said, turning toward the enforcers. The workshop filled with smoke and sparks. Alarms blared from the city outside. The sound of boots and shouting echoed through the alleys. Lyra ran into the side corridor, coughing, clutching her metal arm. It buzzed with heat and pain. She stumbled and fell. The arm scraping against the wall, she looked down. The skin around the connection point glowed faint blue, tiny circuits crawling under her skin. "It's changing me," she thought in terror, inside. Mason fought to hold the door. The enforcers broke through. One of them shouted, "Deactivate the experiment." Another grabbed Mason by the collar. "Where is she?" Mason smiled weakly through blood on his lip. Gone, he said, the alien hissed. You fool! You've doomed us all. Mason frowned. No, he whispered, I saved her. Outside, Lyra reached the end of the alley and turned back. Flames licked the workshop roof. She wanted to run, but she couldn't. She turned and sprinted back, ignoring the fear, ignoring the pain. She burst through the smoke-filled doorway. Mason, she shouted, coughing, her eyes stinging. Through the haze, she saw him kneeling, surrounded by broken metal and fallen enforcers, his chest bleeding. He looked up weakly. Lyra, you came back, he whispered. She dropped beside him, tears falling down her cheeks. I can't lose you, she cried. He smiled faintly. You won't, he said. You'll stand. For both of us. The metal arm hummed again, brighter than before. Mason's blood touched the open wires near her shoulder. And something incredible happened. The entire system pulsed. A spark of life traveling through both of them. Blue and red lights merging. Lyra gasped as her nerves burned with new energy. The enforcers staggered to their feet, aiming their rifles. But the air vibrated. The metal around Lyra started to move, bending toward her like magnetized steel, forming a shell of floating armor around her. Her eyes glowed silver, and her voice, once small and soft, became calm and strong. You will not hurt him, she said. With a single motion, she raised her arm, and a burst of blue light shot from her palm. Throwing the enforcers backward, the walls cracked, flames swirled. Mason stared at her in disbelief. Lyra, he whispered. What are you? She looked at him through tears. You built me, she said. Now let me protect you outside. The colony alarm screamed louder. Patrols were coming. Shadows of more soldiers ran toward the burning workshop. Mason tried to stand, but his leg gave out. Lyra grabbed him with her new strength, lifting him easily. The mechanical arm steady and powerful. They ran through the smoke into the empty night streets. Behind them, the workshop exploded in a burst of blue fire, sending a shockwave across the desert plains. Dust rose high into the alien sky as they disappeared into the darkness. Only one thought echoed in Lyra's mind. They laughed when they saw me without hands, she thought. But now they will learn what human hands can build. The desert night was cold and silent. Only the faint hum of Lyra's new arm broke the stillness. She and Mason had taken shelter inside an abandoned cargo dome miles away from the burning colony. The air smelled of rust and smoke. The human's breathing was weak, his leg wrapped in torn cloth. His blood had darkened his sleeve. Lyra sat beside him. Staring at her arm glowing faint blue, it looked strange. Alive yet alien. The skin around the joint pulsed with light, and sometimes she could feel things that weren't there. Wind, warmth, even pain. Mason opened his eyes slowly. His voice cracked. You saved me, he whispered. Lyra shook her head. You built me, she said. I just became what you made. Mason smiled faintly. No, he said. You became more than I made. His voice faded, exhaustion pulling him down. Lyra pressed her hand against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. The metal fingers trembled but obeyed her will. A strange warmth spread from them, not cold like steel, but gentle like skin. It's working, she whispered. Amazed, for the next 2 days they hid. The colony guards searched the desert. Drones passed overhead, and the news networks called it the human experiment incident. Some called Mason a terrorist. Others called him a genius, but everyone spoke the same words. A weapon had been born. Inside the dome, Lyra trained. Each movement of her arm brought pain. Sparks flickered along her nerves, but she refused to stop. Mason guided her weakly, his voice a whisper from the corner. Slowly. Think before you move, she nodded, sweat on her forehead. If I think, it hurts, she said. If I don't think, it moves, Mason smiled. Then stop thinking. She closed her eyes, breathed slowly, and reached toward a metal beam across the room. Her arm trembled, then steadied. The beam lifted an inch, then 2. She gasped, and the metal snapped in half. Falling loudly to the floor, Mason flinched. You're stronger than expected, he said softly. Maybe too strong. That night, Lyra looked at her reflection in a cracked mirror. The blue light from her arm illuminated her face. She looked both alive and machine, beautiful and broken. She touched her cheek with the cold fingers, whispering to herself, What am I now? A soft sound answered her. Mason, half asleep, spoke. You're what they fear most, he murmured. A bridge between what's living and what's built. Lyra turned to him. They'll never understand, she said. Then you'll have to show them, he replied, coughing weakly, but peace never lasted long. On the third night, the dome door hissed open. Lyra froze. Her eyes glowing faintly, silhouettes appeared, not guards, but two alien civilians, both carrying energy lanterns. "We found them," one whispered, "the freak and her creator." Lyra stepped forward. "Please," she said softly. "We don't want trouble." But one of them spat. "You brought it already," he snarled. "The soldiers burned half the market because of you." Mason tried to stand, limping forward. "It wasn't her fault," he said. "They attacked us," the alien raised his weapon. "And now they'll come for all of us," he hissed. The weapon fired, a bright flash of red. Lyra jumped in front of Mason without thinking. The shot hit her chest. Her body jerked backward. The energy dispersed across her metallic veins, and the floor cracked under her feet. She felt no pain, only fury. Her eyes burned brighter than ever. "Stop!" Mason shouted, but it was too late. Lyra's arm moved like lightning, grabbing the attacker's gun and crushing it in her grip. Sparks burst. The alien stumbled back, terrified. "Monster!" he screamed, running out into the night. The other followed, their shouts fading into the desert wind. Lyra stood frozen, her chest still glowing where the shot hit. Mason looked at her, horrified and awed. "You absorbed it," he whispered. She stared at her hands, trembling. "I didn't mean to," she said. "It just happened." Mason shook his head. "It's not your fault," he said. "You're adapting faster than I ever imagined." She turned to him, her voice trembling. "But what if I can't stop next time?" Mason sighed. "Then I'll help you control it," he said. "Pain means you're still alive, Lyra, remember that." Over the next few days, Lyra practiced again and again, learning how to hold, lift, and touch without breaking everything she touched. The process was agony, each nerve connection burning brighter. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she screamed, but she never quit. Mason watched with pride and fear, knowing she was becoming something far beyond his understanding. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, Mason placed a small metallic disc in her hand. "What's this?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Your second arm," he said. "Ready to join its twin?" Lyra looked at it, tears in her eyes. "Will it hurt?" she asked softly. Mason nodded. "Yes," he said. "But after pain comes strength," she sat down. Bracing herself, Mason activated the injector. The pain hit her like fire. Her body arched, lights flickered. Her breath caught in her throat. She screamed but didn't stop. She pressed forward, the sound echoing through the empty desert night. And when it was over, silence, the glow dimmed, and Lyra opened her eyes. Both arms shining, steady, alive, she lifted them slowly, fingers moving like they had always belonged to her. She looked at Mason, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I can feel them," she whispered. "I can feel you." Mason smiled faintly, exhausted but proud. "Then you're ready," he said. Outside, the distant sound of engines echoed. The military had found their trail again. But this time Lyra didn't hide. She stood tall, her metallic hands gleaming under the twin moons, and whispered quietly, "Let them come." Her voice calm, strong and no longer afraid. Morning broke over the crimson desert, and the first light touched the dome where Lyra and Mason hid. Dust shimmered in the air like tiny stars, and for the first time in her life, Lyra could feel the warmth of dawn, not with her skin, but through the delicate sensors in her new hands. She lifted her palms slowly, letting the sunlight wash over them. The metal glowed faintly gold, and her fingertips trembled with sensation. She laughed softly, half in disbelief. "It feels real," she said. Mason smiled from where he sat repairing a broken battery. "Because it is real," he said. "You're part machine now. But that doesn't make you less alive." Lyra turned her hands, flexing her fingers again and again, fascinated by every motion. "They used to laugh when I tried to pick up things," she said quietly. "Now I could hold the whole world," Mason chuckled tiredly. "Let's start with this wrench first," he said, tossing it gently toward her. The wrench spun in the air, and for a heartbeat, Lyra panicked, but her new reflexes kicked in. Her hands moved like lightning. She caught it effortlessly, her grin spread wide. "I did it," she said. Mason nodded proudly. "You're faster than I expected." But their peace was short-lived. Outside the dome, the hum of engines grew louder. Shadows passed across the sand. Mason's expression darkened. "They found us again," he muttered. He limped toward the window, peering through a crack. 4 armored skiffs were approaching from the east, their banners marked with the sigil of Security Division 9. Lyra's excitement faded into dread. "We can't run forever," she said. Mason turned to her. "We're not running this time," he said firmly. He placed a small device in her hands, a pulse core, round and bright like a beating heart. "What is this?" she asked. Mason sighed. "A power cell, but more than that. It's your limiter." He looked her in the eyes. "Serious. If your systems go out of control, this will drain your excess energy, but if someone removes it, your body could overload." Lyra tightened her grip. "So it keeps me alive," Mason nodded, "and keeps you from becoming something you don't want to be." A deep rumble shook the sand. The skiff stopped nearby. Soldiers jumped down, their boots crushing the dust. "Mason, halt!" a voice shouted through a megaphone. "By order of the council, surrender the experimental subject immediately." Mason took a slow breath. "They'll call you a weapon," he said softly. "Don't believe them." The door burst open with a thunderous clang. Soldiers stormed in, rifles raised. Lyra instinctively stepped in front of Mason, her arms spreading protectively. "Don't move," one soldier yelled. "By law, you are forbidden to—" His words cut off as Lyra's arm began to glow, faint blue light spreading from her shoulders to her fingertips. Mason shouted, "Lyra, remember, control it!" But her pulse was racing. The soldiers' shouts mixed with the sound of crackling power. One of them fired. The blast hit her chest. Energy rippled across her body, but instead of falling, she caught the bolt midair, her palm absorbing the light like water. The soldiers hesitated, fear showing in their eyes. "She's absorbing our fire." One yelled, "Fall back." But Lyra didn't chase. She lowered her hand slowly, her voice calm but firm. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, "but I won't let you take him." Behind her, Mason worked frantically on a small console, trying to overload the skiff's sensors. "Just a few more seconds," he muttered. "Lyra, buy me time," she nodded, stepping forward, her glowing hands leaving streaks of light in the air. The soldiers opened fire again, bolts of plasma striking her from all sides, but none passed through. They bent around her like ripples in water. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her chest. Her knees buckled. Mason looked up in alarm. "What's happening?" She gasped, clutching her chest. "The limiter, it's overheating." Mason shouted, "You're channeling too much energy." Her vision blurred, every nerve screamed with heat. She fell to her knees, metal fingers clawing the dirt. "I can't." "Stop it," she whispered. Mason limped toward her, pressing a cold tool against the limiter. "Hold still," he said. Sparks burst, the limiter hissed, then clicked. The glow dimmed instantly. Lyra collapsed forward, breathing heavily. Her hands twitching weakly, the soldiers hesitated. Unsure what to do, one shouted, "Move in and secure them." But before they could step closer, the sky above flashed with blue light. A new craft descended, sleek and black, carrying the insignia of the Council Elite. Mason's face paled. "That's not good," he said. Lyra looked up weakly. "Who are they?" He swallowed hard. "The ones who think they own everything, including you." The craft landed with a thunderous hiss. A tall alien woman stepped out, her armor shining like silver fire, her voice smooth and cold. "So this is the hybrid," she said, studying Lyra like a specimen. "Impressive work, human," Mason glared. "She's not your experiment," the woman smiled thinly. "Everything on Clyra 9 is property of the Council," she said. Raising her hand, "Even miracles," Lyra's pulse spiked. The limiter beeped again. Mason placed a hand on her shoulder, whispering, "Don't let them make you their machine." Lyra rose to her feet slowly, her eyes glowing silver. "I'm not a machine," she said, her voice steady. "And I'm not yours," the councilwoman smirked. "Then prove it." Lyra's hands burst with light, brighter than ever. The air trembled. Sand lifted in waves, soldiers shielded their faces. Mason watched her, both proud and terrified. The ground cracked beneath her feet as she took a step forward. "I can feel everything," Lyra whispered, "the heat, the light, the pain. It's all mine." The councilwoman's smirk faded. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Lyra's expression softened, a tear running down her cheek. "Touching life for the first time," she said quietly. And then the world exploded in light. When the dust settled, the council craft was gone, the soldiers unconscious, and Lyra knelt in the sand beside Mason, both breathing heavily. She looked at her hands, now glowing faint gold instead of blue. "They feel warm," she whispered. Mason smiled weakly. "That's because they're finally yours," he said, and for the first time in her life, Lyra reached out, not with fear, not with shame, but with pride. She touched Mason's face gently, feeling his heartbeat through her fingers, and whispered, "The first touch I ever gave was thanks to a human." The blast had left the desert trembling. Smoke curled toward the twin suns as they rose again over Clara 9. Lyra knelt in the sand, her metal hand still glowing faint gold. Mason lay nearby, breathing shallowly. The battle had ended, but peace still felt far away. She looked down at him, her new hands shaking. "You're hurt again," she whispered. Mason smiled faintly. "I've been worse," he said, his voice thin. You did it, Lyra, you stopped them." She shook her head, tears burning her silver eyes. "No," she said softly. "I lost control. I could have killed everyone." Mason reached for her, his hand weak. "You're not a weapon," he said. "You're proof that compassion can build what hatred destroys." His voice faded into a cough. She caught his hand quickly, holding it tight. "Then why does it feel like I'm falling apart inside?" she asked, but Mason didn't answer. He'd already fainted. Lyra looked around the battlefield. Broken armor and twisted metal scattered everywhere. The council troops were gone, some escaped, some unconscious. But the air still hummed with leftover energy from her own outburst. It was seeping into the ground, turning sand into glass. The price of her power. She dragged Mason into the shade of a broken skiff. His blood staining her arm plates, every movement felt heavy. Her systems flickered with warnings. Temperature rising. Energy unstable, but she ignored them all. She tore strips of cloth from her torn cloak and bound his wounds as best she could. When she finally sat down, exhausted, she heard a distant hum above the horizon. More ships appeared, sleeker, darker, hundreds of them. She recognized the mark on their wings. Not the council's, but something older. Something worse, the architects, the ancient makers of the first machine warriors. A race even humans whispered about. Her sensors buzzed, detecting their signal. "Unit Prototype 7 detected," a mechanical voice said from the sky. "Return to containment." Lyra's chest tightened. Mason had once told her about the architects, machines that tried to create perfect life, but failed because they lacked empathy. She looked at her hands, shaking. "So that's what I am to them," she whispered. A failed experiment. The first ship landed nearby, sand blasting in all directions. Its ramp lowered with a hiss. From inside stepped a tall figure of silver metal, its eyes blank blue. "Hybrid Unit 7, it said in a cold, echoing tone. "You were not authorized for emotional growth. You will be reabsorbed." Lyra took a step back, her arms raising instinctively. "I'm not your unit," she said. "I'm Lyra." The machine ignored her. "You are property," it said. "Return to base or termination protocol will commence." Her hands glowed brighter. The air trembled. "You can't take me back," she said softly, "because I was never yours." The ground shook as the machine lunged. Moving faster than wind, Lyra met it halfway. Their clash split the air with light. Metal against metal, sparks flew like stars. Her strength matched its, but each impact drained her, her systems flashing red inside her vision. Power limit exceeded, a warning beeped. She gritted her teeth. "Not now," she muttered. The architect threw her into the sand. Standing over her, "Emotion is inefficiency," it said. "You are flawed." Lyra looked up, smiling through blood and dust. "Then maybe being flawed makes me real." She grabbed its leg. Pushing energy through her palms, a shockwave blasted outward, tearing the machine apart in a burst of blue light. When the smoke cleared, Lyra was on her knees, panting. Her arms flickering between gold and red, she looked back at Mason, still unconscious, still breathing faintly, and felt guilt crush her heart. "He gave me life," she whispered, "and I'm using it to destroy." A second ship descended, this one larger, its metallic voice echoing across the desert. "Assimilate or perish." She stood slowly, her voice calm but fierce. "If creation comes at the cost of freedom," she said, "then I choose the price myself." Her chest panel opened slightly, revealing the glowing limiter core, Mason's design. She touched it gently. "You said it keeps me human," she whispered. "Then I'll use it like one." The core began to glow, her arms flaring like suns. She turned toward the sky, raising both hands. The architects fired energy beams down. She caught them in her palms, redirecting them into the core. The power built and built. Too much for any system to hold. Pain tore through her. Her nerves screamed. But she didn't stop. "If I fall," she whispered through gritted teeth. "He'll live." The desert lit up with blinding light. A wave of pure energy surged upward, smashing through the attacking ships, sending them spiraling into the clouds. For a moment, everything went white. And then silence. When it ended, Lyra fell to the ground. Smoke rising from her shoulders. Her arms burned black. Her chest dim. The limiter flickered weakly. Mason stirred, groaning. "Lyra?" he whispered, crawling toward her. She looked up, her eyes faint silver. "I'm here," she said softly. "It's over." He held her, his hands shaking. "You saved me again," he said. She smiled weakly. "No," she whispered. "You saved me first." She looked at the sunrise breaking over the distant dunes. "The price of creation," she murmured, "was pain. But the reward was feeling." Her arms went still. The light fading, Mason pressed his forehead against hers, tears falling onto her metal skin. "Don't go," he whispered, but she only smiled. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "As long as you keep building, I'll keep living." And as the wind swept across the endless sands, carrying away the smoke and the silence, the desert glimmered where she fell, 2 handprints glowing faint gold in the dust. Shining long after the sun rose, a mark of love and defiance, the price of creation paid in full. The desert was silent again, the warships gone. The air filled only with the faint hiss of cooling metal and the heartbeat of wind. Mason sat on the scorched sand, cradling Lyra's still body in his arms, her once golden hands now dark and cracked, the light inside them fading to a dim pulse. He whispered her name again and again, hoping she'd answer. "Lyra, wake up," but she didn't move. Her silver eyes were closed, her lips parted slightly. Almost like she was sleeping, Mason's throat tightened, his hands trembling as he held her closer. "You can't leave me," he said softly. "You're not done yet." For a moment, nothing happened. Then her chest flickered faintly, a single spark of gold glowing beneath the broken plating. Mason gasped. "You're still in there," he said, wiping the dust from her face. "You fought the impossible, Lyra. You don't get to stop now." He placed his hand on the limiter core that pulsed weakly in her chest, the same one he'd built to protect her. "You burned yourself out," he whispered. "But if I can reroute the backup cell." His voice trailed off as he tore open the metal casing of his own wrist pad, exposing a tiny power crystal, the last of their energy supply. He pressed it into her chest connector. Sparks jumped instantly, burning his fingers. He didn't stop. "Come on, you stubborn miracle," he said. "Breathe." The sand beneath them hummed as the circuit completed. A wave of energy surged through Lyra's frame. Her fingers twitched, her eyes opened slightly, glowing faint silver. "Mason." Her voice was faint, trembling like a child's. He laughed through tears. "Yeah," he said. "It's me. You did it, Lyra. You saved us all." She blinked weakly. "Saved?" she whispered, her gaze drifting toward the distant horizon, where the wrecks of the architect's ship still smoked. "I thought I destroyed everything." Mason shook his head. "No," he said softly. "You destroyed the chains that kept this world afraid." He pointed at the glowing horizon. "Look, do you see that?" She turned her head slowly. Far away, lights were flickering across the colony dome. Small blinking lights, signals human and alien together, helping survivors, sending rescue drones. "They're working together," Mason said, smiling tiredly. For the first time, Lyra stared at the lights, a soft smile forming. "Then it was worth it," she whispered. But Mason's smile faded as her eyes began to dim again. "No," he said quickly. "Don't do this." "Don't you dare." Lyra's breathing slowed, her voice gentle and fading. "You gave me hands, Mason," she said. "You gave me a chance to touch the world. I don't regret anything." Tears rolled down his cheeks as he shook his head. "Then let me give you one more chance." He looked at the shattered limiter core, its glow nearly gone, and realized he could fuse his own neural implant into it. It would keep her alive, but it would end his. "If pain means life," he whispered, echoing her old words, "then maybe my pain can bring you back." He worked quickly, connecting wires, transferring energy, his hands shaking, the sand around them glowing faintly as energy flowed. Lyra felt it immediately, her chest tightening. "Mason, what are you doing?" she gasped. "Stop, your body can't handle that." He smiled weakly. "I told you once, nobody's useless," he said softly. "You gave me purpose, now let me return it." She reached for him, her fingers trembling. "Please don't," she said, tears in her silver eyes. "I can't live if you—" But his hand touched her cheek gently, silencing her. "You'll live for both of us," he said, his voice breaking. "Promise me that." Her lips trembled. "I promise," she whispered. The transfer completed. A surge of golden light filled the air. Mason's eyes closed, his hand still resting on her face, and his body went still. Lyra screamed his name, the echo rolling through the desert like thunder. The light from her chest flared once more, then settled into a steady, strong rhythm. When the dawn finally broke, the storm had passed, the skies clear and blue for the first time in years. Lyra stood alone on the high dune, wind tugging at her cloak, Mason's tools and tablet hanging at her side. Her hands, once metal and cold, now glowed faintly with life energy. His life energy. The colony below had changed. The humans and aliens rebuilt together, for the first time sharing power, knowledge, and trust. Some whispered about the girl with silver eyes who had stopped the architects. Others called her the bridge between blood and steel. Lyra never stayed long in one place. She traveled from city to city, helping rebuild, teaching others how to merge machine and flesh safely. Every time she built a new arm, a new limb for someone broken, she would whisper the same words Mason once said to her. "Nobody's useless," she'd say, smiling softly. Years passed, and her legend spread beyond Clara 9, beyond even the star systems that once feared her kind. She became a symbol, a reminder that creation built from kindness could outlast creation born of power, that even machines could learn compassion if humans showed them how. One evening, as the sun set again, painting the desert in gold and violet, Lyra stood where Mason had died, the sand still warm beneath her feet. She knelt down, tracing the faint outline of his old footprints, her voice soft as the wind. "You gave me hands," she whispered, "but more than that. You gave me a heart." Her golden fingers pressed into the sand, leaving glowing handprints beside the old ones, the same place where he had fallen, the same spot where she first stood again as more than a broken girl. She looked up at the stars, and her silver eyes reflected the twin suns. "If you're watching," she said with a small smile. I kept my promise, and as night covered the world, the faint shimmer of her hands glowed across the desert horizon. Warm, human, alive, the hands that saved not just a man, not just a planet, but the bridge between two worlds, forever lit by the memory of one human who believed that compassion could build miracles.